Welcome back.
And therefore we come to the second question. Are we achieving the goal that it was set to actually achieve?
Let me say that genetically modified crops add to the options and the suite of possibilities that we have to deal with issues of food insecurity. I would not say that it is a silver bullet that is going to bring total transformation as far as food security is concerned. But it is one of the technologies, one of the options that we have to improve productivity and therefore reduce food insecurity. For instance, through genetic engineering and genetic modification, it is possible to develop crops that are drought resistant and also resistant to pests and diseases. And because of that, they will be higher yielding and will be able to have more productivity and reduce food insecurity substantially.
Yeah.
But alone in itself cannot be called a silver bullet, but it contributes significantly to improving productivity and therefore reducing insecurity, food insecurity.
Okay. Right now, we are faced by many risks. We have environmental risks, climate change. When you talk about climate change, we are narrowing down to droughts and extreme floods. With these kind of challenges facing Africa, is it time we embrace GMOs as a complementary to provide the food security issue? Not only that, but we can see the population, we are aging, globally we are aging towards 8 billion. In Africa, I think we are equally growing spontaneously. And economists say that we are going to settle by 2050. Are we just going to keep quiet and look at people dying of hunger without, embracing the technologies that are available to solve such issues? What is your thought on that?
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend the use of genetically modified, crops. There are many countries in Africa that have already approved the growing and even importation of genetically modified crops. For example, South Africa. South Africans have been eating GMO foods, I don't know, for the last 15 or 20 years.
Wow.
There are other countries like Nigeria that have approved GMO. There are other countries like Sudan that are already growing a lot of genetically modified cotton. And many African countries are now embracing the technology because it has been proved to be effective in increasing productivity. In the US, for example, and in Canada, genetically modified foods have been used for the last, almost 30 years. Yeah. And we don't have very, very, very convincing, we don't have any convincing studies that link genetically modified crops with cancer.
Yeah, Prof, hold it there. Okay. Because is it true? Is it a fact? Is it scientifically founded? Please tell us, how safe is genetically modified organism, especially when it comes to consumption of the same? What are some of the environmental risks that are associated, or whether they are myths or truths, but what are the risks that are associated with genetically modified organisms? Talk more about the safety so that the viewer and the public can understand and embrace it without fear.
Okay. Let me start by saying that there are some international organizations that have been charged with the responsibility of ensuring that the food is safe for consumption worldwide. One of them is the FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, or the United Nations. And FAO has categorically stated that GMO foods are safe for human consumption. We also have the World Health Organization that has produced a lot of dossiers to show that GMO foods are safe for human consumption. We also have many studies done by a lot of European institutions also saying the same thing, that GMOs are safe. Even FDA, the Federal Department of Agriculture in USA, has actually approved GMO as safe for human consumption. But there has been a misconception, and this misconception came from a paper that was published by a scientist called Gaël Cellarini, a French scientist, who produced a paper linking genetically modified crops with cancer. But what he did was that he fed GMOs on rats, a particular type of rat called Sprague-Dawley. And this rat naturally generates tumors. It is naturally predisposed to development of tumors.
Even without introducing the
Yes,
GMO.
especially the older generations of that one. So it's like he had been commissioned by people out there to link GMOs with cancer. Because of the methodology that he used that were not scientific, the paper was later retracted by the same journal called Food and Chemical Toxicology Journal. So they retracted the paper because the data was unconvincing and the results were unreliable. So it was retracted. But now the anti-GMO lobby groups have continued to talk about this paper. It's linking GMO foods with cancer. That's where all this talk about GMOs being linked to cancer came about. But let me also say that there are also political and economic issues surrounding this matter of GMOs. For instance, GMO crops are resistant to pests and diseases. That means farmers will not have to buy chemicals and pesticides. And what does that do to the multi-billion chemical and pesticides industry? So definitely they will not support that technology. And it is known that they have been behind some of these lobby groups that are against the technology. That's one side of it. The other side is political, the political side of it. There have been wars between Europe and America. For example, this time Europeans were very much against the technology. Why? Because Americans were ahead of the technology and they wanted to have sufficient time to develop their own technologies to compete with the Americans. And the only way they could do that was to slow the adoption of the technology in Africa by supporting lobby groups. So there are also political and economic angles to this debate of GMOs. But from a scientific point of view, let me be honest with you, from a scientific point of view, the technology is safe because even before those crops are released in the market, they go through very, very, very serious and rigorous scientific processes to ensure that they are safe. Sometimes they go through an even more serious and rigorous process than conventional crops. What we need to do is to ensure that the products that we are using, the GMO products that we are using in the country are produced by our own scientists. And we have got the capacity to produce these GMO products. Kenyatta University has got the capacity and they have been doing it. Nairobi University has got the capacity and other universities. So this will create more confidence in the technology because it has been produced by our own scientists using our own resources and our own circumstances. We cannot rule out the so popular conspiracy theory from the Western world, and that's what causes a lot of mistrust on this technology. That maybe when they bring these GMOs from America or from Europe, they've got some genes that can reduce the fertility of people or can cause death. There's that fear.
Actually, the idea is because this is a technology that is coming a lot from the Western world, they want to eradicate or eliminate the black community. But on the same note, do you think there is good funding or enough funding when it comes to research, especially when it comes to the kind of budgets we are given for research in our country? And what would you advise? Because you see, all these things are being brought because we are not able to be self-sufficient by ourselves.
Yeah, I would say that the government is not providing enough money for research activities, for research and development in the area of agriculture. Recently, the government made a pronouncement that they're going to reduce funding to universities, and that, of course, includes the funding for research. And that is really detrimental to research and development, entirely, let alone research and development in the area of GMOs. The government should do more in order to support research and development in the agriculture sector, because Kenya's backbone, Kenya's economy is basically founded on agriculture. And if we do not invest enough in agriculture, then what are we doing to ourselves? So I would call upon the government to provide more resources, especially research and development in agriculture, even in the area of GMO, so that our scientists have the full capacity to develop, GMOs that are under our own, conditions and products that people can trust, because there will be no suspicion that some funny genes have been put in those GMOs to eradicate us. We have the capacity, the manpower, and the facilities to develop these GMOs ourselves.
Exactly. And Prof, you're aware about the misconception and the moral issues surrounding the genetically modified organisms. And I think the voice is coming from our religious groups. A good example is here in our country, Kenya, especially in matters pertaining GMO, because we have a lot of biasness. And let me just be specific, especially from our religious leaders in our country. What do you have to say about that?
Thank you for that question. Let me take you back to the book of Genesis. In the book of, I'm a believer, let me just say, first of all, I'm a believer, I'm a born-again Christian, and I believe in the Bible. And in Genesis, we see a situation where Adam was given authority by God. He was told to take care. He was given dominion over every plant, every organism by God. So that was the authority that man has been given by God to take charge of the creation and to use that creation to solve his own problems, including food. When you're growing crops, you are taking charge by growing those crops so that you can solve the problem of hunger. And let me also say that all knowledge is given by God. The Bible says that we can do nothing without God. Jesus was talking to his disciples and he told them, without me, you can do nothing. So whatever knowledge scientists have has been given to them by God. And science is about discovery and use of technologies and innovations to solve existing problems. Take, for example, surgery. What do surgeons do? God has given them knowledge and understanding to carry out a surgery, to save a life. If we were to say that surgeon is praying God, then this person would be left to die. And we don't want. The purpose of doctors is to save lives. The same case with food. If we do not give people food, they will die. The only remedy for starvation is food. The people who have been dying, in Turkana, for example, could have been saved by food. So food is a remedy and a product that is developed to save lives. When you're talking about praying God, I think that's another misconception because God has given that knowledge and understanding to man so that he can use it to solve his own problems. We have had situations where an organ has been taken from one person and put in another person to save that man's life. If we use the same argument that we are praying God, then we should not do it. We should let the person die because it is not moral. So we should not pray God by getting that organ and putting it in someone else's body. The same case with blood. And we have had situations where organs have been taken from animals and put into human beings to save their lives. If we use the same argument that we are praying God, then we should not do that and we should allow the person we should not let nature take its course. So I think that misconception of saying that we are praying God is unfounded and it's uncalled for because knowledge is given by God. And God has given us science to use it to address our problems and our challenges.
Yeah, I like that bit where you say God has given us science to address the human challenge.
Yes.
Because most of the time there's a disconnect from the people who judge the two things. They say scientists are coming, they're trying to replace God.
That's not true.
Yeah, even for me, I'm a junior scientist, yes. I must say. And I know for sure what we do is we actually discover God's creation every other time when we are in our field of science. And it's quite a misguided way of looking at things.
Let me say that as a scientist, the deeper I get into science, the more I'm convinced that God is the author and creator of life. Take, for example, the basic unit of life called a cell. It is so complicated. Up to now, scientists cannot understand how the cell functions. We don't have even a tenth of an idea of how the cell functions. It's so complicated, it's so ordered. And even up to this day, scientists have never been able to develop a cell, to manufacture a cell. They can multiply cells through biotechnology, but nobody has ever been able to develop a cell from scratch, because that is that is life, and it's authored by God.
True. Which is quite deep.
Yes.
Therefore, it's so misguided and misfounded. And
Yes, I would say so.
there is no ground in whatever misconception that there is about scientists trying to replace God or play God or recreate whatever God has already created.
Science are simply using the knowledge that God has given them, the technologies, and applying that technology to solve existing human problems. And one of the biggest human need is food. And if people don't get food, they'll die. So science is helping to ensure that people do not die because of starvation.